Hi there, my name is Will, and I am recording a presentation for the Creating a Meaningful Relationships and Setting Boundaries with Your Students course. The objectives I'll be covering today, among others, are thinking about the big picture goal of improving student relationships from a personal and professional perspective, considering the advantages of improving student relationships by being the faculty advisor of an extracurricular activity, understanding what interpersonal relationships are and the impact of developing relationships to improve student success, discussing choice assignments and how working with students on topics in which they are interested helps build the relationships with them, discuss difficulties for low-income students, particularly at the district where we work, and potential solutions for moral and practical help. So, for starters, this is for people in my district. I'm going to talk about the benefits. So, let's get started by thinking about what are some of the biggest benefits that you can think of off the cuff. For students, they have great relationships with their teachers. Now, some of the anticipated responses that I'd expect would include improved attendance, improved involvement that the students would have, and also improved grades. Now, the other side is, what do you think the biggest benefits that you can think of off the top of your head for us as teachers and staff to have great relationships with our students? So this is the selfish part. Now, some of the responses that I would expect, or that I personally can think of myself, are better love of the job, an improved passion for our craft of teaching, improved mentorship for our students, and at the end of the day, or rather at the beginning of the day, it's easier to come to work in the mornings. For me, the personal goals of this course that I had in mind were probably the same as some of the other faculty members in our small department, and they would include witnessing student growth as something much more rewarding than working in the private sector. As you guys know, I have worked in the private sector, and this is going on my 4th year teaching career and tech ed. So honestly, I've worked in the private sector for a little bit longer right now than I have in the education sector, and there are some days where I just don't feel it in, let's say, my heart that I do when I'm working in the education sector. I don't know if I spoke that right, but there are days in the private sector where you feel your soul is being crushed. You don't get that in the education sector. You really feel good, and it's almost beyond words of how you know you're making a difference for students. And that's what I meant to get across by that bullet point. So really looking at someone growing, bettering themselves, especially at a young age, and knowing that those traits and that those learnings are going to benefit them for the future is something I haven't come across working in the private sector as project manager in marketing and sales. Not quite the same in education. And another overall goal for me personally is to just improve the workplace atmosphere and for my overall professional development to become better at this craft of teaching. A little bit of background for me. This shows that I do have a lot of different experience just in 4 years of teaching at the high school level. Those are some of the classes on the left-hand side that I've taught, and there will be more to come at least that I'm aware of, for the upcoming semester after summer vacation. And then on the right-hand side, a little bit of a different situation for me is that I'm an adjunct professor at the local community college, and those are some of the courses that I teach right now. So I stay busy, and also I bump into a lot of the same students that I've had before, which is good for both me as the teacher or professor, depending on what you're thinking of it as, and also for the students who go on to the real world, let's call it. So, as part of my high school experience, I have been the yearbook instructor, so that's been the extracurricular, and I've found that I have a much better relationship with my yearbook students than I do with my other students, and this I've also seen just in my personal experience, along with the readings from the course, is that there is a different dynamics at play. You know, if a teacher is also a football coach, let's say, and also has that student as a student in their class too. So from a personal perspective, I would advise different teachers to improve the relationships with their students overall by becoming an advisor for different clubs and activities if they have the time, if they're able to. In addition to improving the relationships and getting to know their student better, on the selfish part of things, it also lets people stay involved with their interests. Some of the things that I've done outside of yearbook, in addition to yearbook, are working in DECA, which is Business Club, and then also briefly assisting with Esports Club, which aligned with one of the classes that I taught and will teach again, which is game design. Now, thinking about the bigger picture and next steps for me, I'm also looking at football coaching down the line, maybe Skills USA, and if the school opens up these, which they've been talking about, are either martial arts, boxing, or tech club. So in my classes, a lot of them are project-based, and I call these choice or dealer's choice or you choose assignments, where basically I teach the fundamentals of the course and then I lead them to their assignments and they choose the topic of those assignments that are most interesting to them. So some examples of these in my classes are for entrepreneurship, a business plan, for a startup, for example, an accounting class, it's a company analysis, SWOT assessment for all my business classes, for my creative classes like graphic design, web design, etc. There is a professional portfolio that I give out toward the end of the year that I tell them that they can hand off to employers, and also for creation of a 5-page website based on their interest to show that they're capable of creating websites. Now for the companies, different students are into different things, such as sports. Some of the girl students are really interested in, let's say, cosmetics and makeups, etc. So really, it's about teasing out what is interesting for each student individually. Now, as we know, this is a low-income district, and as a faculty member, I do try to understand about their difficulties. Some of them work even full-time in addition to part-time. So I've tried to focus on what's the biggest part of the benefit for them, which makes the most sense going forward, and I offer hope and encouragement. So having students do, I just mentioned it in the other slide, but SWOT analyses for their personal life and for their goals personally. Personality tests so that they have an idea of what fields make the most sense for them once they want to get out into the working world. My classes are dual credit college level classes, which can save them money, and for many of them, actually I have to work on some during my spring break. I write letters of recommendation, give them portfolio assignments, and help them on different applications, such as scholarship applications, job applications, etc. So for the effects of student relationships on instruction, I have takeaways for myself personally and professionally. By understanding the students' personalities, I can understand the types of lectures they may like the most, whether they're serious, humorous, long, or short, and also if they prefer verbal or electronic communication like email. And I've had a Google Voice number before for texting. Also, by understanding their interests, I make reference to different types of interest, whether it be sports, anime, in different industries when I'm going through my lectures, and also different assignments where they choose what to cover. By understanding their struggles, I can sympathize and offer sensitivity and concern, and whether it is extra time to complete an assignment or even to give an alternative, different assignment. Learn about the teacher being a facilitator. That this involves project-based courses that allow students to practice the fundamentals in a controlled, positive environment where they reach their own conclusions. And also I call it sometimes being a professor in the room to my other staff, where I'm around for questions and to make sure that they're on track while they're working. This is a little bit different for me, but communication with parents, what I've been doing at the start of each semester is I send them an introductory email with what their students can expect from the course. I also meet some of them virtually or in person during parent-teacher nights and conferences. The best way I found to communicate to parents is through email, as many of them are working. I haven't had to reach out to parents with any big concerns just yet. Fingers crossed though, fingers crossed. I'm lucky in that aspect, but the odds are that that's going to come soon. Let's see, also near the end of high school careers, I encourage their parents to be hopeful and realistic about their kids' academic and professional post-high school futures. And then I mentioned to the students, even though it seems counterintuitive with this, I am both a high school instructor and a college level instructor. I encourage students to advocate for themselves because many of them are older and some of them will even graduate within the semester. I mentioned to the students that I've never had any parents of college level students email me or call me regarding their kids' performance. And this goes from the several hundred students I've had during this time. Making class more interesting for those who don't care. Some of the things that I do to help out are using games and fun activities like Kahoot, Edpuzzle, quizzes, group work. So this is pretty typical in college business classes that I've taken. It incorporates a lot of the real world work experience where people are tasked to work together, and again, like I've mentioned a couple of times, basing projects on their own interests. As long as they have know about the fundamentals, you can base things on different interests and be flexible from that aspect. Another thing that I've been trying out are Fun Fridays for camaraderie and morale. So when we're all caught up, or maybe even if we're a little bit ahead, I wrap up the week with a Fun Friday where there could be a review game, just a roundtable discussion if there is anything interesting in the tech landscape that people want to talk about, which there are in some of my computer classes, watching documentaries together. Sometimes for my game design classes, I'll bring in old school console video games. Art activities for different of my graphic design classes. And if we're very much caught up and students are needing time for their other classes, free time. Another thing I offer is entry-level professional advice because I do want the best for them. That's one of the reasons I got into this. So I motivate them to better themselves, to show I care, and I'm there to help them through. Now, some of the concrete different things I work on are recommendation letter writing, talking to them about exploring different career choices and assignments that go along with that actually. Also, portfolio assignments for end of terms, talking to them about LinkedIn, resume writing, cover letter and job application help, and as well as scholarship help. Another thing I've learned from this class are personal stories and how they could build relationships with students. Now, so these are just some examples that helped me get to know my students a little bit better. There's the origin story of how I got started in teaching from working in the private sector and business. Also living in Korea and traveling throughout, which is interesting for some of the students who want to leave their hometown and see what else is in the world. I talk about different examples of working in business, what it was like in college, what they might expect in college, and also stories of good work behavior and not so good work behavior. This is regarding the Danielson component of creating an environment of respect and rapport. That's Danielson at the top right. I create and establish class rules at the start of the semester, no exceptions. I encourage everyone to participate in the rule-making process. And then throughout the semester, I have rewards for good behavior and good results. What that could involve are me bringing in candy, for example, and also dealing with misbehavior as it comes up. And there hasn't been much misbehavior as of yet, but when there has been, I speak to the student directly about that. The next Danielson component was communicating with students. And what I do is I bridge the gap between communicating with students as high school students and as college students. So I use higher level, big words, let's call them, and phrases. And I encourage students to speak well, to use good grammar, so that they sound better and speak better. I also communicate with them in their preferred style. Some students email only, even though I may have them in class, they'll ask me questions via email. Sometimes literally the next class, I'll get an email from them. When I say next class, the next period, the class. Also, some students, not as much as the email-only students, but some students prefer to talk face-to-face only, and there is a bit of a mixture of some students who prefer face-to-face and email. Some things that I've known that can help, I know that there might be a mixed perspective on this, but emoticons and emojis can help. Sometimes I can see that they use emojis back to me. Sometimes they even start off with emojis, and also using humor for the students who enjoy using humor, and as I mentioned earlier, being serious with those students who prefer to be serious. Beyond high school, for me myself, having students at the high school level, I again have them at the collegiate level. This puts me in a unique position to have students as a high school teacher and as a professor, and as two similar student roles, but with subtle differences, going from a high school student to a college student. As career and tech educator instructors, we rely on college and career readiness indicators data. That's what CCRI stands for. And we want to see and hear more of student success stories, and we want to make these positive success stories known to current students. And what I do is I bring up these positive examples to my students as often as I can. And sometimes I maintain touch with students even after courses have ended. This involves recommendation letters, putting students in touch with people for networking and career help, other help with applications that I've mentioned earlier. For my outside resources, I've looked at this Teach Like a Champion book, and it's actually got 49 different teacher tricks, well, not tricks, tips is a better word, and this is just one that I concretely have been using. It's called Post-it, and it literally says post your lesson objective in a visible place in your room. So this is an example that I have for my game design class at the start of the semester. That's in the screenshot there, and it shows what they expect to do. And this has been giving me good results because I know the students know walking into the room what they can expect to do that day. Another outside resource was Uncommon Sense Teaching. Now this got me into a creative process of thinking of different things I can do. So instead of teaching 100% of the time on job function, I encourage students to think about what industry is interesting to them. So rather than teaching just for being an accountant or a project manager or a marketing coordinator or whatever the job may be, graphic designer, etc., I discuss different industries for some assignments as a slight change of pace here and there while I still cover the content. So different industries such as music, technology, makeup, cosmetics, apparel, etc. And also I show interest in students' interests, which may not particularly be mine. Some of the students, high school students, are really into anime, hip hop, sports, and other things that are teenage age based, like art, crafting, etc., game playing, etc. And then some students I even have teach me, and some of these were about martial arts and cryptocurrencies. For my last outside research, I looked at this book called The Courage to Teach, and I'll let you read that, but it essentially talks about identity and integrity and doing good to the idea of teaching and the philosophy of teaching. And what this means to me is that I discuss personal lives within reason to build strong relationships with students. So if I ask a student what they're doing for the weekend and they say they're going to sleep, I would mention that might be what I would need to do myself. And just things like that, just to build a little bit more rapport and relationship with the student. My overall personal takeaway from this course is that I've learned the pedagogical, practical, and theoretical advices from all of the papers, PowerPoints, and other materials from this advancement course. For my colleagues, and Quasi, just think about this from a big picture, deep perspective. If there are any questions you have, let me know. But also, what is something you can take with you to improve your relationships with your students? Thanks for listening. I've learned a lot and I've put into practice as much as I could, and that is great, and I thank you for this. Here's the bibliography, and that is